by legal arguments, more petitions, and eventually they not only won free pardons but the fair home, and they were reunited with their families, and they were greeted in triumph. And so we've remembered that story. It's been a key moment in the episode, and what's on the anniversary, the centenary of the trial, the TUC really went to town. It was in 1934, 100 years later after the trial, and I'm sure there was a mood that they needed a party. They'd been through the general strike, the depression of the 1930s was in full swing. So the TUC really did organise this week-long event. I'll show you some of the images and the way that the festival then, the rally as it's called, then what it looked like up until the time that perhaps Dick and myself got involved.
Wasn't that much afterwards.
No.
So this was the scene in 1934 in Dorchester. Tolpuddle wasn't big enough to house such a large gathering of people. Great parade of banners. The TUC had cottages made. There was a new headstone. There were lots of going on, and since then there was really an annual event at Tolpuddle, an annual rally. It consisted of a march and speeches. There was nothing else. People would arrive at midday, and you'd have the march and some speeches. But Labour leaders came. It was a pilgrimage for many. This is Neil Kinnock in the 150th anniversary. You can see the fairly primitive way that the arrangements, and people had tea on the lawn. There was no drink, and it was largely a reunion of agricultural workers, and the Agricultural Workers Committee led by Oliver Trevitt. You can see all
that's him on the left. No, on the right.
Yeah.
So this was the format. It was tried and tested for many years, but in the 90s certainly it was a fading event, and they were struggling really to come to terms that people didn't want to travel all that way just for a march and to listen to a few blokes. But Oliver Trevitt, he had his own particular style, as we will hear now, as the chair of what was often all made.
Now the order in which they speak is immaterial. Somebody's got to be first and somebody's got to be last. So this year, first on the list, Norma Willis, General Secretary, TUC. And now we come to the leader of the Print Workers Union, SOGAN, Brenda Dean. She also, I believe, sits on the TUC General Council, and during the Wapping dispute, she did much to improve the image of a trade union leader. Not only did she come over the media as being human, but also quite good looking as well. Brenda Dean.
Thank you, Chairman. I accept your apology for being a bit of a chauvinist. I'll tell you something else. I was also encouraged by the number of retired people that are here today in this march.
So yes, I think that was Oliver's style, bless him. But it was largely men, and people. As people got fewer on the land, the numbers dwindled. This was the scene, I think in 1997, you could see people brought their banners and put them on the lawns. There was a tea tent where the wives of the committee would prepare sandwiches and tea and coffee. They were the only refreshments available. And there was a VIP tent where we now have the children's area, where the speakers were allowed their own private sandwiches. So that was the style. It was struggling, and I think the committee really didn't know how to improve it, and it was heading for a point where I think it it would end, really, as we saw many other traditional events around the country came to an end. And we feared for Tolpuddle, I think genuinely, that it would just fade out.
I think it's important to remember that, you know, the events very much reflected the views and the interests of the people who started them, and they put in years making these things work. It's just that the world moves on, society moved on, they wanted something different. Well, maybe not different, but maybe just some subtle changes to make it more enjoyable. And that's what we had to face up to. We didn't want to lose that the basic story, but we needed a little change.
A little change. And is this where you both come in? Is this when you go, oh, let's bring some little changes to Tolpuddle? I mean, Dick, explain to me how it came about, this notion of having a festival at Tolpuddle for the Tolpuddle Martyrs.
I don't think in the first place we ever said, let's have a festival. There was a rally. It was a Sunday rally.
Okay.
It was numbers of people coming to it were diminishing every year, and it was quite elderly. Now I'm elderly now, but nonetheless, you know that unless you can get a new generation in, whatever you're doing, you eventually you're going to lose what it is. And so I think in the first place we just wanted to find a way to attract more people. And how do you attract more people to come to attract a nice bit of Dorset on a summer's afternoon? You'd think it would be easy, but it was quite difficult because we'd done it in a certain way for a long time, and getting change, as you probably all know, getting change, persuading people to done something in a particular way for 30 or 40 or 50 years is quite difficult. Yes. So it's a job that Nigel and I had to persuade people. Yeah.
I mean, I was appointed as the regional secretary for the TUC, and it was a great honour that as part of that job came this responsibility. And I did feel that we have this responsibility to look to nurture something and pass it on, hopefully in a better form than you inherited it. But it was obvious something had to change. We had to put on more entertainment. We had to make it more attractive to families and younger people. And that meant inevitably that we'd have to have beer. and I was really fortunate that Dick was floating around Bristol at the time and worked for the Workers' Beer Company with a degree of experience that I didn't have. I hadn't got a clue about organising a festival or running a bar.
Yeah. So Dick, for those who don't know what the Workers' Beer Company is, do you want to sort of explain that a little bit more before you then talk about
you haven't got an hour to spare, so let's try and do a synopsis.
We might cut out.
The trade union movement for a very long time has tried to use culture in the widest sense as part of an organising thing. It says, how do you people know if you're going to attract a crowd, you've got to entertain them, and just making long speeches is good for some people, but for a majority they want something different. I was a member of a trades council in South London. Battersea was a trade union council back in the end of the 70s. We were forever trying to run campaigns, whatever it was. Ronald Reagan's coming to Britain. Let's have an anti-Ronald Reagan campaign, whatever it was, anti-apartheid. But the problem we always had was money. How do you organise when you haven't got any money? And trades councils, probably in most cases, are still now without much money. And what we realised was I and other people were putting on gigs in community centres, Rock Against Racism type stuff. But you never made any money because the only person who made the money was the person who had the bar. So we spent a long time trying to figure out how can you manage a bar? How can you organise a bar? How can you get a bar that's licensed and legal where you can make money, not in an exploitative way, but make money that we could then spend on our campaigns. And as I said to some of you before, you heard, we tried all sorts of things. We pretended that the law said you could sell cider without a license. It's not true. But we ran events where we sold cider. The police used to walk by and go, right, I do. Yeah, thanks, mate. But it wasn't, you needed a different way of doing it. And by one of those sort of bits of fate, I got a job working for the GLC, the Great London Council, for those of you who are very old to remember. In the days of Ken Livingstone. And one of the things the GLC did, but amongst many things, was they decided they wanted to put on public entertainment for people all sorts of entertainment for all sorts of people in London, in parks and community centres, wherever. And although I'd gone there to do something entirely different, I ended up working on this with this small team who were putting on events. And so the little bit I knew about putting on events already, I learned a lot more. And in the course of it, you realise that actually we've got to find a way to sell beer. And one of the guys who worked for me said, a cousin of mine called Michael Eavis runs his festival down in Somerset. And he's always looking for people to do a decent bar for him. Anyway, one thing led to another. So I mean, the beer incident was, as far as I was concerned, it was a useful way. I mean, I like beer. It was a useful way to make a bit of money in order that we could do what we wanted to do, which was to campaign for all the things that trade unions traditionally campaign around. And so talking to Nigel, probably with beer, somewhere in Bristol, one night at the end of the 1990s, we had a conversation about what could we do about Tolpuddle.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
and that's how we got there. And Nigel, earlier you said that the committee were opposed to any kind of change. So you two have had this lovely conversation. You're thinking, do you know what? This is how we can bring more people to the Tolpuddle Martyrs story. But you've got a committee that doesn't want to see any change. So how did you go about even suggesting having a band on the side?
I think that they themselves recognised that the event needed to change, but I can completely appreciate how that they'd spent their lives running this event, and it was an annual reunion. They met old comrades, and each year there were fewer making the journey. Old Fred's died last year. I mean, it was tinged with sadness, but they knew that something had to do. But that doesn't mean to say that they relished the prospect of change. I mean, they didn't like the idea of children. They just didn't see it as part of the event. They didn't understand that you could actually get people who will pay you to run bars and catering. They thought they were struggling to get volunteers to produce the sandwiches, and they didn't realise actually people will pay you to come and sell sandwiches as a concession. But we desperately tried to bring them with us, and I think we largely succeeded. We didn't bring everybody. The landlord of the pub, who really didn't like the event and didn't like trade unionists, used to take down all the signs, all the pictures off the walls when anyone arrived.
Gosh.
He resisted.
They had quite nice memorabilia in the pub, old pieces of old newspaper cuttings and that, which was it all added to the the feeling of being in the pub. Except on the weekend when half the world turned up to celebrate the martyrs, he took it all down. They were particularly hostile towards people from what they saw as the big cities. So it was the Scousers. Oh, we don't like Scousers. What's wrong with Scousers? We don't like Cockneys either, Oh, well, hang on. Nor Brummage.
Is anybody from outside of the Tolpuddle area, really?
No.
Fortunately, the manager of the pub moved on, and we were able to explain that if this event doesn't survive, we're all the losers. But if we succeed, we're all going to gain.
Yes, yeah. So you have your first festival, Nigel. I think you said you had some pictures to show us. I don't know
yes,
if you want to maybe pop them up, but
the first. This was the leaflet that we did. I mean, that was an important change. Just getting hold of the way the event was promoted, the look and feel of it. Before it was a piece of single color A5, and they only printed about 1,000 of them. So we refreshed it, made it look brighter, included children, and I think Dick was chose the. We were careful about with the music. We wanted something bright and modern looking, but we didn't. This wasn't a rock festival. This wasn't. We wanted something that was very traditional. I don't know whether Dick wants to talk about Eliza Carthy. She's actually coming back on the online festival in a few weeks.
Heard it here first, exclusive. But yeah, Dick, so why did you pick the Carthy family? Because it was Eliza and her family, wasn't it?
Yeah, because I mean they are the sort of they wouldn't like me to say the royal family of folk music, but in a sense, Liza's parents they're my age. they've been around a long time and done amazing amount of things with traditional music, but making it putting it into a more popular way so the younger audience would appreciate it. And we knew that. I think our long-term feeling was we needed to have all sorts of different music at the event, but to start with, you've got to do it gently. Let's have something which does both bring with it the tradition, but at the same time makes it look something of a newer generation.
Yes.
And Liza fitted the bill tremendously. I mean, then she was young, and she's 20 years have gone by, but she's still there. And she's
young.
Then she was, it was a young woman with a very good voice, singing very good songs, both from the tradition, but also songs that she had written or certainly worked on herself. And it was we thought it was just the right thing for that sort of moment of change that Tolpuddle was going through. So I hope she felt the same.
Yeah, well, we can ask her in a couple of weeks' time.
But beyond that,
I mean, Nigel, when we talked about, sorry, that was me. Sorry, that might have been. What I was going to ask is, so you've had your first festival. It's a lot more positive than you probably may have thought initially when you had those conversations with committee. But over the years, you told me that you learnt a lot of lessons along the way, and you particularly highlighted car parks. It doesn't sound like the sexiest thing to talk about, but I remember you said it.
Let's go step back half one first. The first thing was that one of the things, if you went to Tolpuddle in the old days, what you had was a row of elderly gents who all spoke for quite a long time. And
yes.
one of the things we managed to persuade the committee was that having speakers is great, but having a speaker followed by a musician or a small band, and then having another speaker works so much better. Because otherwise, if you have 6 speakers, one after the other, people go to the pub and it's long walks through the village. So that was one of the big things. I think we broke up that idea that it's sort of a long, fairly turgid sort of part of the afternoon. You have to make it feel interesting. So was that right, Nigel?
Yes, and they were very careful not to be too radical. I mean, controversial perhaps, but at the time, Tony Benn was the longest serving MP in the Southwest for Bristol. He was supported. He always refused to say sponsored by the Transport and General Workers Union. But the committee never invited him to speak. And it wasn't until sort of we gently prized this idea that you have more speakers that we managed to get Tony to come, and then of course you couldn't keep him away. But the car park, yes, it wasn't just a problem that Dick and I had. It's a problem that went way back. You can't have a big event in a small village without the landowners, somebody lending you a field or two to park the cars. And so if the landowners aren't particularly keen on you, and they do have their own issues. So I think Oliver had this problem before me, but I remember one year where I think a fortnight before the actual festival, the farmer said, "I'm sorry, you can't have the field." And there's no other landowners, in these places. So we've always had difficulties with cut. We still have. We still rely on the goodwill of the village and the landowners to lend us, and so we share the proceeds today with the village church.
One thing to remember though is that with a little bit of an agricultural background, is that using a field isn't a question of, can we use the field, and no, it's inconvenient. It's no, you can't, because actually I've got a field full of wheat, or I've got fodder maize, or I'm growing something on it, and I can't cut it to suit you. I've got to wait another week or two. So you have to yes, I think that sometimes there were occasions when there was a degree of awkwardness, but there is the trump card that all farmers can play is, sorry mate, got to get on that field.
The third week in July comes probably just too soon because the harvesting hasn't happened. So often we've had the festival while the combines have been waiting for the music to finish so that they can suddenly start cutting the corn. Other times it's just a week later, but you couldn't rely on that being done to park your cars on it.
Yeah, especially on a slopey field as well, which has become unique to Tolpuddle.
Yes.
There's nothing quite like seeing a combine harvester going through the field and the buzzards are following it, like gulls follow a fishing boat. The buzzards down there will follow the combine, looking for the mice and the rabbits coming out of them.
Rather than me. And so you know, I mean, you touched upon music quite a bit, but you also said that you kind of had a bit of a dabbling in barn dancing at one point. You know, as you were kind of testing the waters of the popular things. We
thought we should experiment with getting people the night before, putting something on the Saturday night, because it had been just a 2-hour event on the Sunday afternoon. Gradually we made it longer, and it started about 11 o'clock. The first people arrived, it was pretty quiet, and we thought, I wonder if there's some way we could entice people to Tolpuddle for the weekend. We had nowhere for them to camp or anything, but we decided to talk to the farmer opposite, who's got a barn and a barnyard, and so we thought, well, let's have a barn dance with a caller, and that's what we did. And it did. We discovered that people found places to stay, guest houses, B&B. So I think that was our first sort of entertainment the night before.
Bit difficult though. Difficult.
Why difficult?
If you do country dancing, then you know what's supposed to happen. But as most of us don't know, and there's somebody on the stage saying, "Okay, take your partner by the waist, swing them round, do this and do that," and people are like, "What?" But of course, if you don't know, the guy who's doing the calling says, "Stop! No, you've got it wrong." He gets off the stage, he comes around and tells everybody how to turn, where to stick your hand up in the air, whatever. Gets back on the stage, starts again, and it's, unless you know it, after a bit, you don't get to dance. You're just getting moved around like a chess piece on this bloody barnyard. And so
it's great for people who enjoy it, who participate. It's not so good to spectate, in my view. We've done Kayleys at Tolpuddle, and they've gone down really well.
But most of us, you know, the sort of latter day thing is that, you know, a Kaylee, they'd like you to dance properly. If you can't dance properly, it doesn't matter. Jump around, have a good time. But the barn dance fraternity are quite purist about these things. You've got to do it properly. It was okay, really. But it was.
Wasn't it at this barn dance that I guess the first Tolpuddle Unplugged kind of came about?
Oh yes, yes, that was my lesson. There was the caller doing. If anyone's been to a Kaylee, the callers can't go on all night. It's a lot of work, so they have to have a break. And during the break, someone came up and said, "You know, we're a little band. Can we play?" And I saw absolutely no harm in it. It seemed to me fine. We had no other music playing, so what was the harm that they could get up and play? Which is what they did. But after about 2 songs, it was so awful. People were coming up to me complaining and saying, if you don't stop them, we're leaving. So in between songs, I just jumped on the stage and said, "Yeah, thank you very much. Let's hear it for them." They weren't very happy. But,
the lesson about putting on bands is if you're running even a small event in a small village, people would approach you in 2 or 3 weeks before and say, "My nephew's son has got a band and it's fantastic and it's really political and he sings all about Tolpuddle Martyrs or whatever, or Tony Benn." And the reality is that often having the right ideas and having been really committed to the struggle doesn't mean you can play a guitar or make it sound good. And so I've done things in the past where I put adverts in the NME. You remember the NME, New Music Express?
Yeah.
You know, for a May Day festival, you want to play on it. Send us a you know, in those days it was probably a cassette, and we used to go through sackfuls of cassettes. And
wow,
I mean, these are great, you know, really well-meaning kids, but some of it was so dreadful.
Yeah.
So that's what Nigel learned that night. Always listen to a band before you book them.
Yeah. I mean, and we're very lucky in that the Tolpuddle Unplugged stage does tend to have very good singers. So, and we've got lots of different stages as well, you know, and we've got fantastic singers and bands, but also on the Unplugged stage. So that lesson was learned very quickly, it sounds like. And then the thing I want to ask you is, for those of the people watching who have been to the festival, they will see the big main stage, you know, the one that's right in front of the cottages. But there's been various main stages built over the years, including one that was still being built as a very good band came on. Is that right?
Yes.
It's a joint anecdote between the two of us, really. But bear in mind, when we started working on that event,
This was the stage.
there wasn't a field.
Show you.
There was just the cottages and the gardens.
Yes.
And whoops.
Oh, brilliant.
He's going to show us it.
Yeah, this is the first year that Billy Bragg came, and you can see how he was absolutely crammed into this funny little canopy.
Oh gosh, I'm seeing it now.
So we knew that we had to get a proper stage. I mean, half of his band was sticking out, and it was going to rain. So one time I appreciated Oliver's country experience, because we all were panicking and running around with bits of tarpaulin, and he just looked up at the sky, which was getting darker by the minute, and said, "Oh, it won't be raining here today," and it didn't. But we knew we had to put up a proper stage, and it's an awkward space, and we didn't want to bring in one of these big inflatable things. It had to be appropriate, so we commissioned somebody to build it, a carpenter. He arrived on the Friday, he started work, and I think as the Saturday went on, we were all starting to get a little bit anxious. And he worked all the way through the night, but we got up on the Sunday morning and looked at the stage, and it was still a long way off being completed. Coaches started arriving, yes, let me show you the picture, if I can share my screen again.
Down so I can see it.
So this was the scene that people were greeted on the Sunday when they were expecting to see the first act performing. Instead, they were watching us running up and down ladders trying to put the roof on, because it did look as if it was going to rain. And we had at the time, the first act was a great singer-songwriter, Graham Moore, who is also coming on the online festival. He's the writer of many of the great Tolpuddle songs. He just set up and did like an acoustic number alongside the stage. Well, I'm not sure which was the most entertaining, watching us building the stage or watching Graham Moore singing, but yes. But
the other thing, of course, is that the guy that designed it worked out that you could take it down and stack it and store it and put it up again the next year. And there must have been like 200 joints on it. So he wrote with a felt tip pen, joint 193.
Wow.
And then took it all down. And of course, you put it in a shed, and next year you get it out, and anybody got 192? No, I've got a 36. It was like, we have to do something different here. So over the years, it's improved, but it wasn't the best place to put a stage, really.
Oh, because you're looking up, aren't you?
You're looking up,
well,
yes.
It's controversial, isn't it? Because it means
it does stop them rushing the stage, though,
Yes, you do often see grown men trying to clamber onto not a very high wall and then just topple right backwards, which is very, very fun for all the kids to also watch their dads do that.
Who was it wanted to have a pit in front of the stage? I forget that. Who was that? I know. Anyway, one of the bands we had, we were told, oh no, they have to have a.
Oh well, the Levelers, yes.
Oh.
Yes,
oh,
there was a lot of panic that year. They're used to playing with a 9-foot pit around them, filled with security guards. So not this little brick wall that people can just step on.
Watching Glastonbury the other night, got an old Glastonbury where the kids were crowd surfing across the stage, and it was like a conveyor belt. The security guards took them and threw them out that way, and somebody threw them back out. They were just coming in. It was like, you think, what's the point of that, really? Anyway, wow. We never had that problem at Tolpuddle.
That was good. And you've already touched upon
it. I think it's great that we have scenes like this with Billy playing and children actually sitting on the stage. I know that there are risks sometimes, and we're very careful, but I think it makes that great atmosphere and a family event that we're proud of.
A very big folk club.
And the kids area has just expanded and expanded over the years. You know, as more families came, more people brought their kids, because now we've got this beautiful area that is so peaceful and serene that it's easy to miss, but so much goes on because of the woodcraft folk. When did they first come on the scene?
We started with odd bits and pieces. We had some help with youth workers who knew about putting on kids events, but it's gradually evolved, and we've got a great team with the woodcraft folk. The NSUWT sponsor it, but Tim Jakes is a youth worker from the Midlands. He comes down with a whole gang of people who've got clowns and storytellers. I mean, it is, for a lot of people who come to the festival, they may never go near it, but it is a beautiful little area. I mean, that space reserved for the VIPs, as they called it, now makes such an enchanting area for children.
And there's music there as well. You know, there's children playing drums, and anyway, it is very nice indeed.
And we're even going to have a whole set of activities online. Music making, storytelling, banner making. Yes. So we're keeping up the tradition.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the things that you see parents quite happily, you know, sort of drop their kids off, and then the kids just don't ever want to go back and play with their parents anymore because it's such a lovely sight. The other thing
it is worth saying though is that it is a bit of a bane if you're running a children's area, because really and truly, you know, it isn't a day nursery. You shouldn't really just dump the kids and go away and get drunk. Unfortunately, some people do a bit.
Yes.
You've got to keep an eye on it.
It's a fun festival, isn't it?
Oh, of course it is.
And the parents.
Yeah.
The one thing I did want to ask is fridges. There was one lesson you learned about being there on site, because over the years, you know, you've realised that this is becoming a bigger and bigger festival. It's an event. It's starting to become a weekend. And then you told me we even had to be there early to make sure the fridges face the right way.
It's the sort of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that I had to learn. Yes, out of the way. I think this was taken early on. This is the size of the fridge. They are the size of container units, and you build the tents around the chillers. So you have to get them in the right place. They're the first thing to arrive. They arrive on the Monday morning before the weekend. And there was certainly one year where we were late getting to Tolpuddle, and the fridge was already installed, and the installers had gone. And we realised that they'd put it the wrong way round. But of course, by then, the tents were being built. So I think we had to get a crane in, if I remember rightly, Dick, from the road to just pick the fridge up and turn it around and put it in the right place. It certainly taught us that you've got to be there before any contractors arrive, because they just dump it where they think best and they disappear. They come on trailers these days. But,
the logistics of it are that at big events, you know, you bring tankers in that are full of beer, or very large Arctics that are stacked with barrels inside. But there's a different scale. But where we do it, we have a bar, but we also have one of the major caterers, a big one that's been with us right from the start, and so they need a fridge as well. So we've got this sort of nucleus of fridges so that different people have their gear in. So once you've built around them, it's difficult to get to the fridges. I mean, it's okay if you're working at the back into the cafe or the bar, but it is getting it right. I mean, Nigel's the man who we see in the sort of small hours, walking up and down, pacing. You know, he firmly believes that a pace of his is exactly so many centimeters, and we never believe it. And he's tapping little things to the ground so we get everything right. And there's always like slightly out, only a little bit, but it's we get there. But it's a fascinating thing to see it work. To see it work is amazing.
And with fridges comes toilets. So obviously over the years we've had more people, more drink, therefore more toilets.
Without being in the least sexist, it's something that obviously will be particularly important to you, because one of the things that about all festivals is there's never enough toilets for women, and that's mainly because men drink more by and large, and then they completely monopolise those bloody sentry boxes, you know, the little toilets. So if you're going to run a decent festival that all people like coming to, you've got to crack the toilet problem.
Now the toilets.
And we managed, because, for instance, Billy Bragg's partner, the only festival at one stage she will go, maybe it's changed now, but a few years ago, the only festival Billy's partner would ever go to was Tolpuddle, because we had nice toilets.
Really?
Yes. At a time when Glastonbury was all struggling with, you know, in a morass, but a lot more people.
Yes.
We were cracking it.
We've always had a lot of good feedback about showers and toilets, but there was a particular year when the company come in of a morning and empty the toilets. Hope people aren't eating their tea, but he came in early morning, he started work, and then he just disappeared. And people started saying, "Where's the toilet? They haven't been emptied," and you know, it's looking a bit grim, really, and he seems to have disappeared. So we were getting on the phone. We tried every number we had for this company. No, nobody was picking up. Gradually, the toilets were filling up and filling up. We had volunteers going around saying, "No, there's a little bit left. It's not overflowing yet." And come midday, and we were worrying that people hadn't even started serious drinking over lunch, and the toilets were closing. And thinking, what are we going to do? And then suddenly he reappeared. What had turned out that one of the first toilets, somebody had put a nappy down the toilet, and it had blocked his pump. So he had to go back all the way to Yeovil to have this machine fixed and come back again. But were we glad to see him?
Yeah. Oh my God! Well, yes. So anybody watching, don't put your nappies down the toilet.
Don't put your nappies. No. or old jeans, or all sorts of things that people want to do.
Yeah. Only ones and twos, please. But it's become a military precision now, because some of our organisers who are kind of watching as we speak, you know, people like Tanya, she will be there on the dot, making sure that they are there to empty those toilets, because otherwise we will hear about it.
The thing is, obviously, it's a good point, because otherwise we might forget to say it. That people like Nigel and myself and the others walk around with radios, sort of, you know, generally looking officious. Well, not officious, but sort of a little bit officious. But behind it, there's Tanya with a huge crew of people who are, you know, picking up rubbish, and they're the ones that actually make it a decent experience to be at. Whereas we're still, oh yes, right, now we do that here. But anyway, so don't forget the people that do the work in the background.
Absolutely, and we have a great volunteer or crew who kind of join us every year. I think there's 70 to 90. It's a big crowd.
Yeah. All they get's a t-shirt.
Yeah, well, it's a very
rubber gloves.
I think you'll find.
Marigold gloves and a t-shirt, kids. Off you go.
Absolutely, but yeah, no, we couldn't do without them, and a lot of them will come with so many skills. You know, it's a trade union festival, and we were saying this last year. We pretty much have a hospital on site, because we have nurses, we have paramedics, we have doctors, we have security staff, all just volunteering to help out this wonderful festival. So yeah, absolute thanks to them. The other thing I wanted to ask you as well is about the weather, because you've been very fortunate, it seems, to have very good weather. I mean, I've been very fortunate. In 3 years it's not been bad at all, but there's been a couple of years when the heavens do open up and you've had to just kind of think, are we going to carry on with this or not? Do you want to tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, I went through, I think we went through a number of years where it was always fine. I mean, there might have been a little bit of a shower, but we dreaded the day when it would really rain, because we'd not experienced it. And the clay soil at Tolpuddle breaks very quickly once it rains if you drive on it. And there was one particular year that was very bad. I remember we've got some protection for the immediate entrance, but we were blagging and buying straw from every farmer in the district, really, to try and reduce the mud and allow people to walk and drive. And so yes, there were lots of volunteers lugging straw up and down. But I remember, I think
that's me actually.
Yes, it's you. Yes, and we met around the gate. I think it was a Thursday night, and we were on the edge of trying to deciding that we had to cancel it because it was too bad. But by the morning, we thought, well, let's sleep on it, because actually people were already on their way. How could we communicate? This is, before probably everyone had Twitter and Facebook. But we left it to the morning, and it dried very quickly overnight, sufficiently. But there was the year when we had to get a tractor in and bring every band, every caterer had to be tractored in and out. Not the most pleasant experience, but people loved it actually. I think there's that Glastonbury spirit that we survived it, but everyone comes together. You all huddle in a tent while it's pouring down outside.
Yeah.
But fortunately, Tolpuddle generally has nice weather.
Yeah, that's good. And tell me a little bit more about the procession, which is really the thing that kind of kicked all of this off, wasn't it? We had people coming together on a Sunday. They'd have a bit of a mini rally, and they'd walk up and down, or march up and down the village. But over the years, it's become this big event. It's, you see people turn up on the Friday and the Saturday, but the Sunday is when you see the numbers double for this. How have you managed that? Because the road is very narrow. You've got lots of trade unions. You've got lots of organisations.
I don't know. I think we must have had a conversation at some stage, though I don't remember, because there was a time when we started doing it, it was referred to as a march. And for some reason, me and I think Nigel as well tended to call it the parade. Part of that was, I think, was trying to convince the village that this wasn't like a sort of army of occupation who were going through somewhere in a hostile way. We wanted it to be it's a celebratory event. Now, I don't know, maybe that's just in my head, but certainly I think we tried very hard to make it not to feel like an aggressive thing. And it hasn't been aggressive. One or two villages in the past were a bit funny about it, but and the whole thing is first of all is, how fast are you going to march? And people like to walk slowly. They want to talk to people. If you've got Tony Benn with you, not anymore, but Tony Benn wants to talk to everybody as he goes. Whereas but if you've got a brass band or a silver band, or even, I think one year we had a cadet force from Dorchester, and they set off at a fair rate, and of course left everybody behind them. So it's getting those things right. And how far do you go? Where do we turn around? It's always been Nigel and I have this sort of, the aspiration has always been that the front of the march gets up the top of the village, it turns around, it gets back before the back end of the march has started. So we have this continual loop of people. I think we may have made it just about once or twice.
But I mean, the thing that has changed is that people, that was all there was the march and the speeches. Yeah. So everybody went on the march. Nowadays, you get back, we're at the front, and you get back to the site, and you realise the site is still full of people. And you think, why aren't you on the march?
Yeah.
So lots of people come. I mean, we try and encourage that everyone has got some reason to march, and it's not. You don't have to join a particular union contingent. It's not regimented. We don't say Unison have got to go here. There's a few principles. The Tolpuddle banner will always be at the front of the march, and the legacy of the Agricultural Workers Union still takes pride of place, alongside the family, who now come in bigger and bigger numbers, who also take their pride of place around the front of the march.
There was a long tradition in political marches where people would try and jump into the front. And I won't go into details about who it is, but different organisations decide they want to be the sort of, they are leading the working class, so they're going to get in the front. Which, anyway, and there was a time when it happened a little bit, but we made it feel relaxed, so it's a bit pointless.
There was a villager, dear old Ben. He was a lovely old guy,
the flag.
From the village, and he saw his duty to come and lead the march with a St. George's flag.
Oh wow!
And of course, some people see the St. George's flag as having all sorts of right-wing connotations, but I mean, Billy Bragg has made a big thing about trying to reclaim our symbols from the right. But he was such a lovely old guy and part of the village that we protected his right to march at the front. And as he got older, he found it harder to keep the pace up. And I used to have to, come on, Ben, you need to go a bit faster.
But we also developed these little things like the march was stopped by the pub and sort of mark time out while the band will play a couple of tunes for all the villagers are outside the front of the pub. Then we carry on and come back again. And there's a cider makers collective in the village, and every year they have a little assembly in the cottage directly opposite the pub. And if you're sort of part of the in crowd, you get invited to come and have a glass of a wide variety of very, very lethal ciders. But so, you know, we try very hard. You know, we're there because the village is part of the history. You know, it's not detached from it. So, you know, it is their history, not just ours.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And that thing about, you know, trying to get to the front, there comes a point in this parade procession, the pinch point, as we call it, where there is no front anymore, and it's whoever happens to just be behind the front, and then you go back. So it's that turning point, isn't it? And it's a fine art, isn't it, Nigel?
But it's one of the great things about the march is because it is one march where you meet everybody else, and that sort of sense of meeting friends and comrades that you've probably not seen for a year or maybe more, and
or a
you
minute.
see them walking the other way. And I mean, it was a bit of a challenge with Jeremy wanting to greet everybody coming the other way, but
Twice.
It's one of the nice things about it. We don't go all around the houses to just do a circle.
Yeah. And then have you ever gone back to the site? So there's people still on site. You're off doing the procession. Have you ever come back and realised what the heck is going on over here? Oh,
well, the worst, I think, was one year when the Methodist says a little prayer before everyone rushes for the street to form up for the march, and I rushed down to try and get the thing started, and that was happening, and I was at the front, and the band was just starting up, and I realised something was going on the radio, only to be figured it out, that the whole site had lost all its power. And the electrician that we had on site at the time had walked off because he'd had a row with the PA company. And we just think I've got Tony Benn next to me and Billy Bragg, and they're going to come back and they want to speak and play, and they've got no electricity. We didn't even have a loud hailer at the time to communicate with people. But thankfully, Tanya's husband Ivan happened to be there with her as an electrician, and he stepped in, and he was brilliant. And
it comes back to it's always Tanya.
We did arrive back. We arrived back at the start. We arrived back at the site at the front of the march, and the power was still off. They were still searching for it, and I persuaded the band, the marching band, to just carry on playing at the side of the stage. And people were going, "Oh, this is quite a nice change, but isn't it about time we heard some speeches?" And then Ivan discovered that it was a guy that did the pig roast had got his extension cable all wound up, and it had blown the whole site.
Wow.
So we then went on to generators, which kept breaking down, and then we invested quite a lot of money. I think we've paid it back now, in putting in a proper power supply with solar panels. So we're a very lucky festival, not only that we have our own dedicated power supply, but we actually generate electricity which goes back into the grid. We are a completely neutral festival.
Yeah. And it's good to say that, because every year we try to be more green. Last year we introduced those sort of keep cups, those bar cups, to avoid plastic, and the site was pristine almost. People like that. People really appreciate.
We had one year, I know, we used to put out loads of black bin liners for people to have rubbish. And I argued that we should just stop. And people would go, "Oh, there'll be rubbish everywhere if we don't give them something to put it in." I said, "No, just don't." And we stopped putting out black bin liners everywhere, and there was no litter. I mean, it's
What
like
year
if
was
you have
that?
a
I
bin
don't
on the
remember that.
streets, you'll always find it's overflowing with rubbish. Take the bin away. People will get the message, and we have a great crowd really that care, you know, that do look after the site, and we're grateful for that. And an hour or two after the event, it's as if there was nobody there.
Oh, I mean, it's up and gone within days, literally.
I'm less of a dog fan, of course. So I'm.
Yeah.
Don't mention dogs.
No, don't mention our lovely friends. Right, we haven't got long, so I'm going to ask you some very quick fire round questions. So you've already spoken about some speakers, you know, sort of Tony Benn, but who was your best speaker that you remember during the festival, if you had to pick one?
Wow.
Joint favourites I've got. One is Michael Eavis, who did come one year and talk about once upon a time he decided to start a small festival in a field in Somerset. And the joint with him would be Jack Jones, who was is my personal hero in the trade union movement. You know, a man who didn't just talk about it. Yeah, he did things. He went to Spain, and anyway, so those are my.
Those are yours. What about you, Nigel? You can have two if you want as well.
Well, Tony Benn obviously was a bit of a star in a special place. He's the only speaker, I think, where he had to come back for an encore. Yeah, it's been. I think Shami Chakrabarti really did well when she was, you know, championing human rights, and she was really proud of coming to Tolpuddle. There was a guy we had, which we were reluctant to let people on, but in the early days we did have gaps, and there was somebody, I think from one of the, it was an international guest from one of the African countries, I can't remember where, but he spoke, and we're always worried once somebody's on the stage, you know, once they've got the microphone, how are you going to stop them? But he spoke for about 2 minutes, and then he just burst into song, and he had this most brilliant voice. So yeah, that's the sort of speaker we like.
Yeah. Someone who comes and speaks into song. And what's your best memory of the festival? We've heard some of the not so good, but what's your best one if you had to? And again, if you want to, I'll give you two.
I've got one. You first, Nigel, or me?
I think it's. I mean, every year we end saying that's the best yet. There is the camaraderie, the friendship, the spirit, the atmosphere. I think it's hard to say that particular moment, but I think that different events you go to, you just go and see a band or whatever. It is different. It's a different feel. That mix of politics, and it's the fact that you can argue with somebody about politics and enjoy a pint, have a laugh, listen to some music. That's quite unique, I think, in the labour movement and generally in life. We tear ourselves apart really over minutiae of the dialectic of, you know, Marxist policy or whatever, and then you know. But at Tolpuddle, whatever strand of opinion you have on the left, if you like, you can come together and have a good time.
What about
Mine
you?
was because the valley is on the stream there. In an early morning in nice summer, you get a mist, and I got up very early one morning. I think I was probably still sleeping on the site. So it was sort of 6, that sort of time. About 6, wasn't that early? And I walked along through and at the front of the cottages, there's a statue of one of the martyrs, and he's wearing a smock, and he's on a sort of tied to a stone. And that year was the year we had a choir from not New South Wales, from Tasmania, and they were there to sing, and they got up early as well, and they were standing around this statue in the mist, and they were singing this song about Tolpuddle. And I'm not a terribly emotional person, but it was sort of, you know, that moment you think, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, that's lovely. Oh, and finally, what are your hopes for the future of the festival? What would you like it to be? I mean, we are already kind of stepping onto new territory by having this virtual festival, but what do you see for the future?
Well, I think people like me and Dick, you know, we're looking after something for a brief moment in time. I want to see new people like you, Ines, and others coming with new ideas that we hadn't thought of, and you know, new music, new politics. But I hope it's always a unifying event that brings people together, that's generous in spirit, that is tolerant of people who don't share your exact political allegiance or your exact faction. But you can come and you can set up your stall, but have a good time and be prepared to enjoy. You know, we don't often, you know, sometimes you look down at people having a good time. Actually, we should have a laugh and enjoy ourselves. It's going to be grim. The next few years could be really hard for working people, but we're still allowed to enjoy ourselves as we inspire people to take on the Tories and what they're going to do to us.
No, absolutely. And what
I
about
think
you?
it's the same, really. Maybe just you phrase it a different way. I've also been quite lucky in the different jobs I've had, where I've been in situations where I've often had the chance to look at people who are working for me, younger people, and think these people, this person or that person, she or he are worth helping and worth, yeah, they've got something, they're going somewhere. And so I've often, not in any sort of patronizing way, but I've enjoyed that prospect of seeing somebody who you think this person is going to be good. And that's what I'd want to do, I'd like to do, is, you know, when I shuffle off from Tolpuddle, is knowing that there's people who we've known and we've seen, and when they were very young, and they're now taking over, and that'll be good.
Absolutely.
And I need a new hip. I'll get that.
So, and Les is coming up. I've got a very short little
Yes.
trailer. I thought we should say what's coming up. So before Les sort of makes any concluding remarks, if you've got a minute to show you very quickly this the what's coming up on the online festival. It is becoming an ambitious weekend of music and politics. We think everyone's going to enjoy it.
Lovely. I'm really excited. Les, before you begin, what I'm going to do is speak to the people who are watching us now. Thank you so much for watching. If you have been watching us live, and make sure that you do go and join the Tolpuddle Martyrs Facebook group. That's where we will be live streaming the virtual festival. And if you haven't got Facebook, then head on over to our YouTube channel and make sure you subscribe. And somebody very, very young told me that if you also click on the little bell, you get notified when we go live exactly. So Les, do you want to tell us exactly what is going to be happening with the Radical History School as part of this amazing series of, is it a 3-month-long session? 3 months, 4 months?
No.
There's some discussion to be had about that, I think. Yeah, the Radical History School is online. You've just seen Nigel's wonderful graphics come up there. The first event will be Rose Wallace on the 17th of July, Exploring Criminal Lives. That's going to be at 3 p.m. Over the course of the weekend, we've got 2 other speakers. John Callow on Saturday between 11 and 12, putting the radical in history. And in the afternoon, Dave Steele talking about the great Chartist meeting on Kennington Common at 3 o'clock. Both of those will be excellent. They both, I know these speakers, they're excellent speakers. They'll be a really good thing to do. And then every Tuesday after that, right up until the 25th of August, where we're going to have a Tuesday evening session, History at Home, whatever you want to call it, the Radical History at Home. And we've got some great speakers lined up with regard to that. I think all those things are either going to be on the Tolpuddle Martyrs website, and they're also going to be on the Tolpuddle Radical History website. and you'll be able to find the details there. If you just look up Tolpuddle Martyrs on the web, and you'll find them. I think it falls to me to say thank you very much to Innes for hosting such a wonderfully informative evening, and to Nigel and Dick for their input. Thank you very much, guys. I thought that was really, really interesting. It took me back a long way. I remember driving up from Cornwall and just marching and going straight home again. There was nothing there. There was a tea tent, and if you were a bit later on, you could get tea in the old school, which is an interesting place to go. So thanks very much indeed. I thought that was really, really interesting. So for all those of you watching, thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us. I hope you had a really enjoyable time. I have, and I wish you a very good evening.